In this lesson, we'll be lighting this camera in two separate ways. The first scene we'll set up is this one, and the second scene we will set up is this one. So let's get started. Let's launch Unreal Engine. And let's go into Games, Blank, and I'm going to enable starter content and ray tracing. And I'm going to create a new project. So the first thing we want to do is go into project settings and go into Lumen and enable use hardware ray tracing when when available, and search for ray tracing and make sure support hardware ray tracing is enabled. You can still follow along if you don't have a RTX graphic card. You can just use the Lumen's normal shadows. Okay, so now we want to also enable a few plugins. We want to make sure that we have HDRI backdrop enabled, and also we want to enable movie render queue. I'm going to enable this and then just hit restart. Now we want to import a few files that I have provided. So if you hold down Control and spacebar, you can open the content drawer. I'm going to make a new folder called Assets. Then I'm going to create a new folder called HDRI and another one called Models. For the HDRI, in the files given, you can go into HDRI and drag this brown photo studio in. And now we have our HDRI, and then we can go into the models folder and go into models. First, we want to drag this background plane in. Just reset everything to default and hit import. And next up, we want to import this camera. So the GLTF file, click on this and drag this in and just hit import. Now we have all the files. I'm going to organize this a bit better. I'll make another folder called materials inside the model folder and another one called textures. So I'm going to click on the materials and hold down control and move all of these here. And also I'll select all the textures and move them into textures. You can also hold on Control Shift and S to save everything. We want to open the camera model up. I think I moved the strap here, so I'll move this back. So I'll open the camera model up, and the glass material that this comes with isn't really great, so we want to change that. So we imported the starter content when we made this project, but if you didn't, you can click on add and add feature or content pack and just go to content and add this to your project. And what we want to do is when we have the camera model open, we want to go into materials, and this glass material, we want to drag this and replace the camera lens, and then just save this and close it. Now let's set up our first scene. So I'm going to go into File and New Level, and I'm going to create an empty level. And now what I'm going to do is drag in an HDRI backdrop. If you don't have this Place Actors panel, you can just come over here into Lights and drag it from here, or you can click on the Place Actor panels. So that will place it on the left. I'll just drag this in from here, and then in location I'll hit this arrow to reset its location. Also, I'll change the cube map to the Brown Photo Studio, and I'm also going to click on go into advanced and use camera projection, and I'll move this down a bit. Okay, so next thing I want is I'm going to go into the models and bring in the background plane, and as you can see that it's black, light, there's no lighting on it. So we want to increase the size of the HDRI backdrop. So here in size, I'll just add 2 zeros, and now we have lighting. So next up, I'll click on the camera and the strap, and I'll drag them both in, and also I'll reset the position, and I'll rotate this 90 degrees first, and then I'll rotate this like 60 degrees. Actually, let's select the strap and then the camera, and then let's rotate this like 30 degrees here. So it's rotated minus 60 degrees on the Z axis. Next up, what I'll do is I'll add a camera. So I'll go into cinematics and Cine Camera Actor. Reset this. I'll rotate this 180 degrees. Move this back a little bit. This up. And in the settings, I'll change the film back to DSLR. I'll change the focal length to 90, and then just move this slightly back. And in the focus settings, you can click on this and click on the camera. That will set the camera in focus. I'll also rotate this slightly. If we click on this grid, then it will stop snapping, and if we click on this, the rotation will won't snap either. So I'll put this in a good position like this. So this is, you can copy this if you want to position the camera exactly how I have. Now I'll click on this icon here, and then in layouts, I'll click on these two panels that will create a split panel view. And over here, what I can do is I can go into top and select this. Now we're looking through the camera. So what we can do now is keep this over here to see how our lighting looks, and we can adjust our scene in this view. So the first thing I want to do is add a post-process volume. In visual effects, post-process volume, drag this in, and if we go down all the way and find this setting called infinite extent unbound, I want to enable this. What this does is any settings we change here will affect the entire scene instead of just inside this box. So I'll move this away a bit, and first thing we want to do is in exposure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enable this min and max EV and set these as 1, because we want a constant exposure. We don't want Unreal Engine to change the exposure as we are lighting the scene. Now let's create a material for our backdrop. So I'll go into the assets folder, make a new folder, materials. I'll create a new material called M underscore base. Double click this. Now hold down 3 and click, and then hold down 1 and click twice. Now I'm going to select all of these and right click and convert to parameter. So over here in the parameter name, I'll name this color. And over here, I'll name this metallic. And here I'll name this roughness. So I'll plug in the color in base color and I'll set this to a white. And in metallic, I'll leave this as 0 and plug this into metallic. And for roughness, I'll set this as 0.5 and plug this into roughness and save this material. Close it. Now I'm going to right click on this material and click on create material instance. And I'm going to name this m underscore background. Now I'm going to apply this on our backdrop, and then I'm going to change the color. I'm going to double click this, and now we can select the color and we can modify this color, and you can see it update in real time. So I'm going to make this a dark blue, something like this. That looks good, and maybe increase the roughness to 0.8 and then close this. Okay, so now I'm going to rotate the HDRI to about 90 degrees. So I'll just click here and set this to 90. This looks about right. Also, just to make sure, let's go over here and click on this arrow. That will remove us from the camera view, and then just click on top perspective and then right click, select the camera and right click and click on pilot camera. This is a better view, I think. You can change the direction of the lights. You don't have to follow along exactly if you want. You can rotate the HDRI however you want. The reason why I'm using this is because it looks good in the reflections over here. So I'll set this to 90, but you can play around with it and do your own thing. Also, if you click on something in this view and then hit G, that will hide all of the gizmos. Okay, so next up we want to start adding our lights. So I'm going to add our main light. I'm going to go here into lights and then drag in a rect light. An easy way to place lights is if you right click them and click on pilot. Now you can move around and you can place the light however you want. So I'm going to place the light from somewhere around here. Something like this looks good to me. Also, once you're piloting it, if you click on this button, it will eject you. Okay, so I'm gonna adjust the size. So I'm gonna set the width and height to about 50. Also, I'm going to search for ray tracing and enabled cast ray trace shadows. And then I'll pilot this again and just adjust it slightly. Maybe make this bigger. Yeah, I think this looks good. This is our main light. I'll make this slightly brighter, maybe 10, 12. Yeah, that looks good. Now I'll duplicate this light and I'll place one behind over here. Reduce the brightness to 1, maybe just so we can see better. Now I'm placing this over here and I'll show you the effects of this. Maybe something like this. If you focus over here, you can see that if I set this to 0, what we are trying to do. So I'll keep this as 1 or maybe 0.5. I think 1 is okay, but the problem is that we can see that our background doesn't look good. So we have a trick. What we can do is if we select this light and we go down into advanced, you can see the lighting channel. So what we want to do is set this light to only affect the lighting channel 2 and remove this from 0. But now it doesn't affect anything. So what we will do is we'll select our camera, we'll select our strap and our camera, and if you go down into lighting and into advanced, we also have our channels. So for this will affect both the 0 channel and the second channel. Now that light is affecting the camera but not the background. So I'll duplicate this light once. By the way, you can duplicate lights by clicking on a light, holding down Alt, and then moving it. So I will right click and pilot this, and now from this direction, I want to add a bit of a highlight over here. So I'll position this light like this, something like this. Yep. And then we are pretty much done for the lighting of the scene. We can adjust a few settings in the camera. If we go over here, we can adjust the current aperture. What this does is it changes the amount of depth of field we have. So if I increase this, you can see it becomes crisper. If I reduce this, there's more depth of field. Also, we can click on draw debug focus plane and we can see exactly where the depth of field is happening. So we'll adjust this to something like this. And then I'll increase this, maybe set this to something like 8. That looks good. And now we can render this out. Another thing I wanted to touch on is if we select this light and we go into ray traced and we disable this, you can see we can see better without the ray trace shadows, and when we enable this, there's more of a shadow inside. The reason is because the ray trace shadows are casting a shadow through the glass material. So we want to disable that. So what we can do is we can select this object and we can double click on the glass material and we can select this part here and then we can search shadow and we can disable cast ray trace shadows. If we disable this and we save this, you can see it looks good again. Also, we can adjust some settings in the post-process volume. If you want, you can go down here into lens flare. You can increase the lens flare if you want. You can also go into image effects and make a vignette if you'd like. You can also change some of, if you go into color grading global, you can change the saturation values, saturated, desaturated, and we also have the contrast, more contrast or less contrast. I'll set the contrast to 1.15 and I'll change the saturation to 1.05. Also, I'll make a bit of a vignette in image effects. I'll make this something like 0.5. You can adjust these settings however you want. And also, if we go down, we have lumen global illumination. We can increase the quality of lumen by cranking these settings up. Also, final gather, and same with lumen reflections. We can increase the quality in ray lighting mode. We can set this to hit lighting for reflections and increase all of these settings for better reflection and lumen quality overall. So now with that done, let's render this scene out. So to render this scene out, I'll create a new folder in assets. I'll call this sequence, or just seq, and I'll create a new sequence by going into cinematics and level sequence, and I'll name this seq underscore camera 01, and I'll open this up, and now we can click on the camera actor over here and we can just drag this in, and now we have a sequence here. So I'll just go here into layouts and make this a single screen layout again, And now if I click on this camera button, we're looking through the camera. This is what we will render. You can also animate the camera if you want here, but right now we're just rendering out one frame. So to do that, click on this button here. This will open up the movie render queue, but if was through the plugin, make sure you have this enabled. So once we open this up, we have something like this. So this looks a bit weird, but what we want to do is we want to click on this unsaved config. Now we can change some settings of how we want it to render. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a game overrides. What this does is it sets everything to the cinematic quality and it just renders everything at the best possible quality it can be. Also, I'll add the anti-aliasing. What anti-aliasing does is if we click on override anti-aliasing and leave the method to none, we can increase the samples per frame. So every image can have multiple samples. So we can set this to something like 64. But if you are rendering a video or an animation, make sure to keep this low because this can increase the render times a lot. So next up, we can go into outputs and we can select our resolution. You can leave it at the default or you can multiply it by 2 and just render in 4K. This is where the images or the animations will be saved automatically. This is the location. You can change this if you want. I'll leave it on the default and we can go down here to use custom playback range. And if we just want to render out a single frame, we can just set this like start frame at 1 and end frame at 2. So this will just render out one frame. Now we can click accept and hit render local. We have to save the map first. So let's go here and save all. And then we can go into assets, create a new folder, maps, and name this camera 01 and save this. Now if you go back here, you can also save these settings if you click over here and save preset. You can save these settings here and now you can just load them in from here. So I'll hit accept and then render local. Now that it's done, we can find it if we open up the project directory, we can go into saved and movie renders, and here it is. We render out this scene successfully. Now we're going to create the second scene for our camera. So we can copy our post process from this level because we'll be using most of the same settings. So I'll copy this post process by selecting it and hitting Control C. Now what we can do is we can create a new level and we can create an empty level and I'll paste this post process here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our models and I'm going to drag in our camera model, reset the location of this camera model, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the rotation of this. I'm going to set this to -21 on the X, 33 on the Y, and -135 on the Z axis. Now what we can do is we can bring in directional light just so we can see while we're working. And now I'll bring in a camera, go into cinematics, camera actor, and I'll rotate this. First I'll reset the location, then rotate this 180 degrees and move this back just so we can see it better. I'll disable the snapping and I'll change the film back to DSLR, change the focal length to 90, and I'll also increase the aperture to 22 and I'll change the focus setting and I'll select the camera. Now we can position the camera better for our scene. think something like this, and I'll reset the focal length again. Now we can add a rect light, bring in a rect light, and I'll enable ray tracing. I'll enable the shadows, and now I'll pilot this, and I'm going to move this behind the camera. So what we want to do is go back into layouts and enable the two panel layout, and I'll pilot the camera in this one so we can see better. Now I'll pilot the light. I'll position this. Now while I'm doing this, I'm going to delete our directional light now so we can just focus on the lighting. So I'll position this light somewhere around here. So you can see the location of this light, and also I'll reduce the intensity a bit, make it 2, 3, 4 seems good, and I'll change the size to 50 by 50. And now I'm going to duplicate this light. You can duplicate the light by holding down Alt and moving it. And I'll pilot this again, and now we'll use this as our main light. So I'm going to position this somewhere like this. This looks good, I think. So what we can do now is, what I want is to add a bit of a highlight over here. So I'll go into bring in a point light. Also set this to ray traced. And now I'm going to pilot this light, and I'm going to position this somewhere like this, and I'll reduce the brightness to about 1 or 2, however you want it to fill in your scene. Also increase the source radius to about 2. Yeah, this looks good. Decrease the brightness 0.5, 1.5 is good. So this is the setting we'll be using for this scene. You can look at the position if you want to copy these lights. This is the point light. This is our main light. And this is our rim light. Now we want to render this scene out. So what we can do is we can go here into sequence. We can right click and create a new level sequence, or you can just click on this button over here to add a level sequence. So I'll create the sequence. I'll name this sequence underscore camera 02. Also, I'll save this entire level. So I'll go into save all, and I'll name this camera 02. Now we can open up the sequence, and we can go back into our one pane layout, and we can drag our camera actor in, and you can click here to look through the camera, and we can click on our render settings. Now this has already put our settings, our old settings here. If you see two of these, if you see the old one as well, you can just right click and delete that. So now you only have one. So click on settings, and we saved the settings, so we can just click here, and you can click here. This will load our old settings back. So we have our anti-aliasing already enabled, our game override is already enabled, and our resolution already enabled. You can change the frames if you want, but this is a new sequence, so it won't override the old sequence. But just so you can see, we'll change the start frame to 2 and make this 3. If you're using the same sequence and you're rendering out multiple different renders, then you would want to change the frames, or else it will just override the old image. And we can just accept and hit render. And now we're done. Here we are.